The rain had been falling for 2 hours when Lizzie finally stopped pretending she had somewhere else to go. She sat on the front steps of the building she'd called home for 4 years, her 18-month-old son Carson pressed against her chest, her one large duffel bag soaked through beside her. The eviction notice was still in her hand, a single page that had ended everything in 30 seconds. She had paid her rent, every month on time for 4 years. But Damien, the man she'd trusted, the man she'd had a child with, the man who'd promised he changed, had been funneling her rent payments into his own account for 3 months. Paying nothing, telling her he handled it. By the time Lizzie found out, the landlord had already filed. And Damien was already gone. She had no family in the city. Her mother was back in Atlanta, working double shifts and unable to help. Her savings were $340, the amount Damien hadn't gotten to yet. Carson whimpered against her shoulder. His little body was warm, too warm. She pressed her lips to his forehead. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're okay." She did not believe it. She had nowhere to go. It was 10 in the evening. Her baby's temperature was rising. And then headlights turned into the parking lot. The car parked and a man stepped out. Late 30s, Korean, still in his hospital badge from what must have been a very long shift. He was carrying 2 plastic bags of groceries and walking fast, head down against the rain, when he saw them. He stopped. Not with the polite, uncomfortable half-pause of someone deciding whether to get involved. He stopped completely, like she was something that required his full attention. "Are you all right?" he asked. Lizzie almost laughed. "Define all right." He set his groceries down on the dry step above them, crouched to her level. His eyes went from her to Carson and stayed there. "How old?" 18 months. He reached out and pressed 2 fingers to the side of Carson's neck, gently, professionally. Then his palm to Carson's forehead. He looked up at Lizzie with calm, careful eyes. "He has a fever. Has he eaten?" "A few hours ago." "Come inside." "I don't know you." "I'm Seo-jun. I'm a pediatric doctor and I live on the 3rd floor. Your son needs to be warm and I need to check his temperature properly." He stood and picked up his groceries. "You can leave the moment you want to. But right now, the rain is making it worse." Lizzie looked at her son. At the rain. At this stranger with a hospital badge and grocery bags and eyes that held no agenda she could identify. She stood up. "And I need you to stay with me here," because she almost didn't. She almost said no. And if she had, everything you're about to hear would never have happened. His apartment was clean in the way that said he rarely had time to make it messy. Medical journals on the coffee table. A half-drunk cup of tea gone cold. Framed photos on the shelf. An older couple, a younger woman, a group of people in white coats at what looked like a graduation. Seo-jun moved fast and quietly, the way people do when they've learned to think and act at the same time. He took Carson from her arms, asking first, just 2 words, "May I?" and laid him on the couch with a blanket. Thermometer from a first aid kit. 101.4. Not dangerous yet. But we need to bring it down. He went to the kitchen, came back with infant medicine, a damp cloth, a bottle of water for Lizzie. When did he last have medicine? This morning. Okay, this will help. He dosed the medicine with the precision of someone who did this every day, which Lizzie realized he did. He'll sleep. You should too. I'm not sleeping in a stranger's apartment. Seo-jun looked at her steadily. Then sit. You don't have to sleep. But you're not going back out there tonight. Lizzie sat. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Carson's breathing evened out. The rain hit the windows. Seo-jun made tea chamomile, without asking, like he'd already decided she needed it, and set it in front of her. What happened? He asked. Not prying. Like he had time if she wanted to use it. So she told him. All of it. Damien. The rent. The eviction. The $340. She hadn't told anyone, had been too ashamed, too angry, too exhausted to form the words. But they came out now, sitting in a stranger's apartment with her sick baby sleeping on the couch, and it was the first time all night that she stopped shaking. Seo-jun listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. You're not staying on those steps, he said finally. I'll figure something out tomorrow. My spare room has a bed. A real one. Carson can sleep there tonight and we can talk tomorrow about next steps. He met her eyes. I'm not asking for anything, Lizzie. I want to be clear about that. I'm a doctor. I have a spare room. You have a sick child and nowhere to go. This is simple math. Why? Seo-jun looked at the photo on the shelf. The older couple. Because my mother came to this country with $40 and one contact number and a stranger helped her. She told me never to walk past someone who needed help if I had the ability to give it. He stood and picked up Carson carefully, not waking him. Come on. He needs a real bed. She followed him. She told herself it was just one night. She was wrong. The next morning, Lizzie woke up to the smell of rice porridge and the sound of her son laughing. She found Carson in the kitchen, sitting on a folded blanket on the floor, fascinated by a set of wooden chopsticks Seo-jun had given him to bang together. Seo-jun stood at the stove. His hospital badge was gone. He was in a gray t-shirt and looked like someone who had slept 6 hours instead of the 2 she suspected. His fever broke, Seo-jun said without turning around. Temperature is 98.8. He woke up hungry, which is a good sign. Lizzie stood in the doorway and felt something crack open in her chest. Not sadness. Something older and more frightening than sadness. Gratitude so large she didn't know what to do with it. Thank you, she said. Sit. Eat first. Then we figure out the next step. You don't have to do that. Seo-jun turned around. I know. He set a bowl in front of her. Sat across from her. They ate, and Carson banged his chopsticks and morning light came through the windows and for a moment it felt so normal that Lizzie had to look away. I know a housing advocacy lawyer, Seo-jun said. She handles wrongful eviction cases. What Damien did, using your rent payments, is fraud. You may have a case. I can't afford a lawyer. She does pro bono work. I can call her today if you want. Lizzie looked at him. Why do you know a housing lawyer? I see a lot of families in my clinic who lose housing. I started keeping a list of people who could help. He shrugged like this was nothing. Like keeping a list of emergency resources for struggling families was just a normal thing adults did. Can I call her? Lizzie nodded. He called. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Dana who spoke fast and asked better questions, took the case on the spot. She said the fraud charges alone could get Lizzie damages. It would take time. But there was a case. Lizzie was still on the couch processing this when the knock came at the door. Seo-jun opened it. Damien stood in the hallway. He wasn't there for his son. He was there because someone had told him where Lizzie was. And the look on his face was not guilt. It was ownership. Lizzie. Damien looked past Seo-jun like he wasn't there. We need to talk. She doesn't have to talk to you, Seo-jun said. His voice hadn't changed. Still calm. But he hadn't moved from the doorway. Damien's eyes finally moved to him. Took him in. Dismissed him in about 2 seconds. Who are you? Someone she knows. Which is more than you deserve to be right now. Damien's jaw tightened. He was bigger than Seo-jun, broader, and used to that mattering. Stay out of this. This is between me and her. She's in my home, Seo-jun said. That makes it my business. Lizzie came to the doorway. She'd been afraid of Damien for a long time, afraid of his anger, afraid of his silences, afraid of the version of herself she became around him. Small and sorry and grateful for scraps. But standing in this apartment, with Carson on her hip and a lawyer already on her case, and this strange, calm doctor beside her, she felt something different. Done. There's nothing to talk about, she said. Dana is handling things from here. You'll be hearing from her. Damien blinked. Dana, who told you? Leave. He looked at her for a long time. Then at Seo-jun. Then back at her. The calculation happening behind his eyes was visible, what he could say, what threat would land, whether he still had leverage here. He didn't. This isn't over, he said. Yes, Lizzie said. It is. Seo-jun closed the door. There was a silence. Then Carson said BA and reached for Seo-jun's stethoscope, which was hanging from the coat hook by the door. Seo-jun unhooked it and handed it to him without missing a beat. Lizzie started laughing. She couldn't help it. Standing in this stranger's hallway with her son chewing on a stethoscope and the worst man she'd ever loved walking away on the other side of a closed door, she laughed until her eyes watered. Seo-jun looked at her carefully. Then the corner of his mouth moved. "He's going to need a new stethoscope," Lizzie said. "I have 3, said Seo-jun. "Now, I need you to stay with me through this next part. Because this is where the real story begins." She told herself she'd be out in a week. Then 2. Then she stopped counting. And this is what happened instead. The spare room became Lizzie's room. Carson claimed the living room rug as his personal territory and Seo-jun let him, stepping around the toy kingdom every morning without complaint. Dana moved fast on the case. The fraud charges were clear, the damages real, and a resolution was coming. But it would take 8 weeks minimum. 8 weeks. Seo-jun said nothing about her staying. He simply made space, moved things from the spare room shelves, added a drawer to the bathroom, bought a baby gate for the kitchen one afternoon and installed it without a word, like it was just a thing that needed to happen. Lizzie got a temp job through her old colleague Rena, remote data work, not glamorous, but enough to contribute. She left cash on the kitchen counter one evening. Seo-jun moved it back to her purse without looking at her. She put it back on the counter. He looked at her this time. Said nothing. She left it there. They never spoke about it again. They developed a routine. He was up at 5:30 for early shifts. She was up at 6 with Carson. They'd overlap in the kitchen for 20 minutes, passing the coffee pot back and forth, talking about nothing consequential, a podcast she'd listened to, a patient case he could mention without violating anything. Carson's new obsession with putting things inside other things. It was the most peaceful 20 minutes of her day. She started noticing other things. The way Seo-jun read the same paragraph twice when he was tired. The way he always chose the chair nearest the door in a room, a habit from years of being paged suddenly. The way he spoke to Carson, seriously, like the boy's observations about the world deserved real consideration. And the way Carson had decided, entirely without consultation, that Seo-jun was his person. When Seo-jun came home from long shifts, Carson crawled to the front door to meet him. Every single time. Like a small, determined greeting committee that could not be argued with. Lizzie watched this happen and felt something shift in her chest that she absolutely could not afford to feel. And then one night, coming home from a 14-hour shift, Seo-jun sat down on the kitchen floor next to Carson and fell asleep sitting up against the cabinet. Just gone. Still in his work clothes. Carson patted his knee twice and then went back to stacking blocks. Lizzie stood in the doorway and looked at this man she had known for 6 weeks, this stranger who had crouched in the rain and asked, how old, and changed the entire direction of her life, and she made a decision she hadn't planned to make. She covered him with the blanket from the couch. It was such a small thing. She had a blanket. He was cold. She put the blanket on him. That was it. But she stood there afterward and looked at him sleeping on her kitchen floor, this man who had opened his door to a stranger in the rain and changed her life without once asking for anything back, and she thought, I am in serious trouble. When Seo-jun woke up an hour later, she was still in the kitchen, pretending to read. He looked at the blanket, then at her. Thank you, he said quietly. You are going to freeze. Still. Thank you. He stood, folded the blanket neatly, of course he did, and set it on the counter. Then he turned to her and Lizzie realized he'd been waiting for something for a while. Long enough to have decided to say it. Can I tell you something? He said. Okay. I don't do this. I don't bring people into my home. I've lived here 4 years and I have never, he stopped. Started again. I saw you on those steps and I thought, this is someone who is holding everything together by herself with no margin for error, and she is still keeping her child warm before herself. He looked at her directly. I admired you before I knew you. Lizzie didn't say anything. I know you're not in a position to, I know there's been a lot. I'm not asking for anything. He picked up the blanket, set it down again. I just needed you to know that whatever happens with the case, whatever happens next, I'm glad you came inside that night. Seo-jun. You don't have to say anything. I covered you with the blanket on purpose. He went still. I've been covering things up on purpose for a while now, Lizzie said. Pretending I wasn't noticing things. Pretending Carson wasn't, her voice caught. Pretending I wasn't terrified that when this ends I'm going to have to leave and I won't know how to go back to not having this. Seo-jun crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and sat down across from her at the table. What if you didn't have to, he said. Don't say things you don't mean. I don't. He reached across the table and took her hand. Steady. Certain. Like a man who had thought this through and was sure. I never say things I don't mean. Lizzie looked at his hand holding hers. At his face. At the man who had answered a door in the rain and just kept showing up, quiet and consistent and real, in a way she had stopped believing men were capable of. I have a lot of mess, she said. I have a spare room. She laughed. Leaned across the table. He met her halfway. 3 weeks later, Dana won the case. And the night Lizzie told Seo-jun, he didn't celebrate the money. He didn't ask about the amount or what she'd do with it. He looked at her and asked one question. One single question that changed everything. What do you want to do now? He asked. For yourself. Not the case, not Damien, not the next problem. What do you actually want? No one had asked her that in years. Maybe ever. Lizzie thought about it seriously. I want to stop doing work I hate to pay bills I resent. I have a business administration degree I've never used. I want to actually use it. Okay. That's it? Just okay. What else am I supposed to say? You've decided what you want. That's the hard part. Everything else is logistics. He said it like the world was simply a logistics problem for people who knew what they wanted. Like her competence was not in question, had never been in question, not even for a second. Lizzie had spent years with a man who made her feel like her ambitions were inconveniences. Seo-jun made her feel like they were simply plans waiting for execution. She started looking for business administration roles that week. By the 2nd week, she had 2 interviews. By the 4th, she had an offer, a real one, with benefits and a title and a salary that meant she could actually stand on her own feet again. On her own terms. Without apology. She came home to tell him and found him on the kitchen floor again, this time on purpose, building a block tower with Carson that was nearly 3 feet tall, both of them completely focused. Like the structural integrity of this tower was the most important thing happening in the world. I got the job, she said from the doorway. Seo-jun looked up. The expression on his face was so uncomplicated, so purely glad, that she had to press a hand to her sternum. I knew you would, he said. You don't know that. Lizzie. I knew. Carson knocked the tower down and shrieked with absolute joy. Seo-jun laughed and Lizzie laughed, and somewhere in that kitchen, in the rubble of wooden blocks and bad history and a second chance she hadn't seen coming, Lizzie understood something. She was home. On a rainy Tuesday evening, exactly 1 year after the night she'd sat on those front steps with $340 and a feverish baby, Seo-jun brought her back to the front of the building. Why are we here? Lizzie asked. I want to show you something. He pointed to the steps. The same steps. Rain-wet and ordinary in the lamplight. I walked past someone on these steps every day for 4 years, he said. I never stopped. He turned to her. And then one night I did. And I've been thinking about that a lot, about how close we came to not happening. About all the versions of that night where I kept walking. He reached into his coat pocket. I don't want to almost happen ever again, he said. Not with you. Not with Carson. He opened the box. I want to be decided. Permanent. Real. Lizzie's eyes blurred. Say yes, Carson said from behind them. They both turned. He was standing 3 steps up, arms folded, at 2.5 years old, looking deeply and personally impatient. He's been practicing that, Seo-jun said. For how long? 2 weeks. He is significantly more prepared than I am. Lizzie looked at the ring. At Seo-jun. At her son who had folded his tiny arms and issued a verdict with the confidence of someone who had already decided this matter was settled. Yes, she said. Carson pumped his fist. Seo-jun slid the ring onto her finger, stood up, and held her in the rain on the same steps where everything had started. Where she had sat with nothing and not known that everything was about to walk through a parking lot with 2 bags of groceries and a hospital badge and the kind of quiet courage that doesn't announce itself. Thank you for coming inside, he said into her hair. Thank you for asking. He pulled back and looked at her, rain in his eyelashes, the smile she had memorized over 12 months and still wasn't tired of. "Best decision I ever made," he said. Lizzie pressed her hand to his chest. "Second best." "What's the first?" "Sitting on those steps long enough for you to find me." He kissed her. Carson made a noise of thorough disgust and walked back inside. And Lizzie laughed, really laughed, in the rain, on the worst steps of her life that had become the best corner of her story. Because sometimes you lose everything in a single day. And sometimes the person who changes it all is already walking toward you. You just have to still be there when they arrive. If this story moved you, drop a comment and let me know. Subscribe for a new story every week. I'll see you next time.